I love this quote. It's from Zig Ziglar. You can have everything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want. And I think that's the mantra that certainly that's a mantra sort of I go by. And I think, directly or indirectly, Zaher and other senior leadership of the business work on that basis as well. It's like we're always trying to add value. The one thing that we've always done is we've cared.
Yeah.
If a deal, you see it even now, right? You think 10 years on, you think if a deal doesn't go ahead or a deal falls apart, I might be a bit more relaxed about it. But every deal matters to me. Like if there's a deal that we can't do or a deal dies, we still get really upset about it. We hate letting brokers down. And I think that for as long as we put brokers and clients first, then we're, and also making sure that we manage loans well and look after our funders, and we treat our funders' money as if it were our own, which we've, for a lot of the time, the loans were our own. So that mantra has always really been in the business, but as long as we don't lose sight of those things, we'll always progress in the right direction. Welcome to the Property Funder podcast. I'm your host, Michael Dean. You can find me on the internet at property_funder. I'm here today with the fantastic Davina Patel, who is the Marketing Manager at Avamore Capital and the podcast producer as well, producer extraordinaire. Davina, how are we doing today?
Great, thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Well done for facing your fears and coming on, and you're going to be asking me a few questions today. We're going to do a bit of a Q&A session. We had a little bit of a gap in the schedule, and we thought we'd use that gap up to answer some questions that you and some of our audience have sent into you.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, so where do you want to start? Where are we going to get started?
So, my first question actually is, what inspired you to start Avamore Capital? So we're going to go all the way back. Founding to your vision, and what was the original vision behind the business?
Well, the original vision and where we are now, there was definitely like a crossover point where it was kind of achieved, and then we've kind of more than exceeded it. In my mind, Avamore was only going to be a 3 or 4 year project for me. My initial thoughts were that I would help get it started, and then I'd exit it essentially, get it started, get it off the ground, and then walk away with a couple of quid in my pocket, and away we went. It's obviously taken a bit of a life of its own. None of us that started Avamore Capital were in specialist finance before we started. We'd never worked at a lender. We'd never worked in a specialist finance business before the day we set foot in Avamore, or we founded Avamore, should we say. So how it came about was that I'd left private equity, real estate, gone and worked for my father-in-law, helped him with his family business, and then also helped him with his investments, mainly property investments. We exited one of his businesses, and then we were investing mainly in office buildings, which we were then going to get planning for to sell them to developers. And we did really well out of that. But there was a period in sort of 2014 where we were fully invested. And so I started to, as a bit of a side hustle, start to help developers raise some cash. And I think as a consequence of that, I ended up meeting loads of people, meeting loads of investors as well, people who wanted to fund those developers. And along the way, I met Zaher. Through Nikolai, who was our sort of third co-founder. He was working with me for our family office, or for the asset management arm of the family office. Mm-hmm. He introduced us to Zaher. We looked at a few deals together, and kind of one thing led to another. We found that we saw eye to eye, and we thought, well, look, he said to me, look, I'll invest in some of these loans if you put some money in as well. Mm-hmm. So, and we were like, well, why don't we turn this into an actual business? And 10 years later, here we are. We've done best part of £900 million worth of transactions, and multiple. So we're not far off. In the next 12 months, we'll easily hit $1 billion of transactions. We've had no capital losses. Looking to deploy about £250 million next year. Looking to raise a bit more money from in the funding market as well to fund our activities. So it's a very exciting time. we've obviously blown way past what I expected the business would be, or the vision I had for the business, which would be, doing, 75, 100 million pound a year. We're obviously well past that. I probably thought we'd only ever have 10 or 15 people in the business. We've got north of 30 people now in the company. We're going very much from strength to strength. I guess the one thing I have been able to achieve is I am now less operationally involved day to day, but I'm still in the office 4 days a week, as you'll attest to.
Yeah, he says that, guys. He's in every day.
Although I might only be in for a few hours.
Yeah.
But those we try to make those hours count.
Absolutely.
And we're doing all right. Financially, we've done all right. We're now starting to do all right out of the business. So, it's taken time. It's definitely become a lot bigger than we anticipated it was. And then I guess, and then I suppose, the one thing, and I know you want to talk about this later, but the one area that maybe I had no idea in my wildest dreams, the technology side of things that we've ended up developing, that definitely wasn't my bingo card in 2015. So yeah, we're obviously really excited about that as well. Yeah,
no, definitely. So in those early days, what problem in the real estate lending market were you most determined, or did you and Zaher have conversations over what you thought you were most wanting to think about?
I think it evolved. I think there's a sort of evolution where I think initially it's just, look, let's just, one of the things I knew from working with the developers was how poorly served SME developers were in terms of their requirements for funding. And so as a consequence of that, and also just what I felt was the bridge lending and development lending space was, unless you were of a certain caliber, it was very expensive and it was very poorly served. It wasn't, the wider specialist finance community is far more professional now. And I don't want to take too much credit for it, but I think it's the operators like ourselves that have come in from, more of a, professional services and private equity and investment banking backgrounds like we did. Mm-hmm. And obviously Amit, who joined us very early in our journey, was also a lawyer. So we're at Taylor Westing. So we brought a high level of professionalism to the market that I don't want to say it was unprofessional, but it's become a lot more professional since then. So we saw that we could see very clearly that there was a need for funding for smaller developers, whether that be bridge lending or whether that be development lending. I think our initial plan was to do bridge lending, but our cost of capital was too high. And so we were almost forced into the development space. Now, as someone who had done a bit of development themselves, a lot like the developers that we worked with, I was always reasonably comfortable with that. It was more of a journey, I think, for, Zaher, less maybe Nikolai and Amit, but actually the third party family offices that would lend alongside mine and Zaher's family, which was obviously our only source of funding at the time. Again, it was a bit of a journey for them as well. And, so it's definitely evolved. What we thought, I think the market that we thought we were going to be serving and the market we've ended up serving, that evolved, and it had to evolve quickly. Otherwise, I don't think we would have had a business.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. So obviously Avamore has grown steadily in what can be a volatile market. What's been the secret to maintaining consistency across the board?
So, if you look at the progress of Avamore over the last 10 years, and you look at the events that have not just occurred since we founded, but even slightly before Avamore was founded. 2014, we had the Scottish independence referendum. 2015, which is when we were founded. A few months prior, we had a general election. 2016, we had the Brexit referendum. 2017, we had a general election. Then 2019, another general election. 2020, we left the EU. So we did the Brexit and we had COVID. 2021, still COVID, but in a slightly different form. And we had our co-founders our two co-founders, Amit and Nick, leave the business as well operationally. So that was very turbulent. Then 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, and then we went from interest rates being 0.5 to 5.25.
Yeah.
We had Liz Truss as well in 2022. 2023, okay, not so much happened. 2024, another a change in government, another prime minister. So here we are, 2025. It's been actually a surprisingly stable year, but we've also seen our management leave as well. So we had Dimitri leave, Phil left, although obviously we're still in contact with him. We're in his new place. We had Matt Foley leave as well, and we had Eric, our chairman, leave the business, and they've been replaced by Greg and Jacob. So we've seen a lot of turbulence through that time, and yet somehow we've managed to just keep on trucking. And I think that the way that the ethos that we'll always have is that you just I've always I love this quote. It's from Zig Ziglar, and and honestly, it's the one thing I'll say it time and time again. So if you've heard me say it before, dear listener or dear viewer, I apologize, but it's, you can have everything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want. And I think that's the mantra that certainly that's a mantra sort of I go by. And I think, directly or indirectly, Zaher and other senior leadership of the business work on that basis as well. It's like we're always trying to add value. The one thing that we've always done is we've cared.
Yeah.
If a deal, you see it even now, right? You think 10 years on, you think if a deal doesn't go ahead or a deal falls apart, I might be a bit more relaxed about it. But every deal matters to me. Like if there's a deal that we can't do or a deal dies, we still get really upset about it. We hate letting brokers down. And I think that for as long as we put brokers and clients first, then we're, and also making sure that we manage loans well and look after our funders, and we treat our funders' money as if it were our own, which we've, for a lot of the time, the loans were our own. So that mantra has always really been in the business, but as long as we don't lose sight of those things, we'll always progress in the right direction. We've seen, we've seen a lot of new entrants come into the market every year, every 18 months. There's always a new bridge lender sets up, or there's always a new development lender sets up, and they often don't make it past 3 or 4 years because they burn too bright at the beginning, and then they overpromise and then they don't deliver. Whether that's on the fund to their funders, the loan performance isn't good enough, or that's generally the case, but generally speaking, it's like they lend too much too quickly and then they fizzle out.
Of course.
So yeah, it was just be consistent, and just remember that we have to remember as well that we sell financial services, yes, but really we're selling trust.
Yeah.
And so as long as people have a high degree of trust with us, we'll always keep progressing in a positive way.
Absolutely. I think just quite recently we had some internal meetings. They were like back to basics, and they were actually from the managing directors. And I think the one point that I picked up on with Avamore is partnerships. I think the business is built heavily on partnerships, whether that's with our funders or with our brokers. It all comes back to that. And of course, the deals that come back and the repeat borrowers, I think that's just proof.
Yeah. And I think that also extends to service providers as well. You think about, I know you've met some of the lawyers that we work with and some of the other professional service providers. We've had our greatest periods of success when we've had the strongest relationships with service providers as well. And like you said, the point you make about partnerships is absolutely key. If you want to, Zaher likes to say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that speaks very much to the principle of partnerships, which is that, as long as we're working with other people collaboratively, generally really good things come from that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, well, that brings me on to my next question. This is actually one of my own. How do you balance growth ambitions with the need for risk management in property lending?
Ironically, you probably want to have that conversation with Zaher rather than me. Generally speaking, I tend to be the one that leans in a little bit more than he does, in terms of I've got slightly more appetite for risk, but kind of I would do, because I've always been a bit more on the sales end of the business, or certainly maybe not originally. I think actually Zaher was much more the sales guy than I was when we started, but it's kind of turned on its head a little bit over the last 7 or 8 years. So I've been a bit more of the person that sort of run things from a sales and origination side of things. Yeah. So that means I'm a little bit naturally more inclined to lean in a little bit more. Yeah. But at the same time, look, we're no strangers to it. I think everyone in the market has experienced this over the last 2 or 3 years, where certain vintages of loans of sort of second half 21, 22 and into 23, the loans that were written during those periods, have a lot of those loans have become challenging from an asset management standpoint. And you've seen much higher default rates as a consequence of that, to the extent that we've had to step in and actually build, push the developer to one side, and we've had to build things out ourselves, or structure JVs with contractor partners, because ultimately things have to get built. There's an interesting lesson there, which is that there's been some interesting lessons that we've got out on the back of that. Now, some would think that those experiences would make us a bit more scarred, a bit more battle scarred, and actually a bit more reluctant to be forward leaning and take risk. Funnily enough, actually, I think what we've realized is that our underwriting standards are almost too aggressive, too harsh. And so we were not doing, it's given us the confidence, I think, was Zaher thinks as well, to be a bit more ambitious and a bit more aggressive at the front end, but in the knowledge that we have to be much hotter in asset management. Yeah. And so, but the key thing is there's an opportunity cost for management and ownership's time. The more time we have to spend fixing problem loans, the less time we've got available to us to originate and bring in new business. But also that the more of our funders' capital is tied up in problem loans, the less they have available to then deploy. Yeah. So there's it's quite circular in that regard.
Catch 22.
So you've got to manage that carefully and make sure that, I still think that if you look back at the loss ratio and our loss ratio, which in terms of capital losses is 0, and obviously we've given up some interest here and there, by industry standards, our loss ratio is negligible. However, what I would say is that I remember having a meeting with a receiver quite early on in Avamore's existence. And I think at the time we'd never appointed a receiver. And his comment to me was, if you've not appointed a receiver, you're not lending enough money. And I think the same goes for if you've not lost money on a deal, you've probably not lent enough money. Yeah. And so, you have to find that balance between risk and deployment. And actually, when you look at what our funders want, I think our funders probably, they obviously want excellent loan performance, right? Because they want to make money, but their priority is capital deployment. They want to deploy at scale. And if you can't deploy large volumes of capital, they have to then find other places to park that cash. So, we have to, and also they can't raise as much money through their investors. So we have to find ways to deploy that capital in a balanced, risk-adjusted manner.
Well, that now brings me nicely onto the Part Complete development product.
or what we used to call a finish and exit.
Yeah. So it's a real innovation. Can you share how that idea came about and how technology supported its rollout?
Well, I think let's just be very clear. The first proper finish and exit that we did was 2 large houses in Hadley Wood. It was mid 2016, so into our first year. It was our first kind of larger loan, so it was about 5 and a bit million total gross loan. Very complex. Truth, we didn't know what the hell we were doing, really.
That's the learning curve, though, right?
If we're being really honest, we really made a mess of it. We really made a mess of the underwrite. We just about got it done. The developer, but it was super complex. And at the end of the day, we got there in the end. But that's because I think the stakeholders, there weren't many other options. So it required goodwill, but we got there. That was the first one that we did. And I think we realized, that there was a product there. We knew deep down there was a product there, and that the market had mispriced the risk on part complete developments. And I think where our levels of sophistication and professionalism were probably excessive for certain types of lending in the specialist space, for part complete, that enhanced due diligence meant that our funding partners were always much more confident working with us, because they really liked the thoroughness that we went to. And I think also it meant that the performance of the loans was better. And ultimately our borrowers benefited because we made sure that all the sort of the ducks were lined up in a row in the way they should be. Whereas I think a lot of people who kind of tried to get into the finished exit or part complete market, they would find it, they would often get into trouble on the back end, because they hadn't realised that whatever sign-offs were required and this, that and the other, and actually they probably struggled, and that probably struggled to get their money back, or it was much more hard work getting their money back, even in very buoyant times, and which meant that they probably shied away from the more complicated or the more build heavy finish and exits. Whereas we found that actually we completely understood the risk, and we felt that we were able to get really well compensated for the level of risk that we were taking. As for the use of technology, today with our systems that we've built, so whether that be our analytics tool through Leap, whether that's the portals and the parsers that we built through Cavendish, and then the ongoing loan management through Centra, our Centra platform, asset management platform. Obviously we benefit from that massively, because we're able to very quickly assess and analyze schemes, understand the background of the individuals involved in those schemes, and really hone down on where the risks are. Yeah. But in the early days, Davina, it's emails and spreadsheets, the same as the rest of the market. It was a very manual, labor intensive process, but one that now, even a complex transaction like that, we can underwrite that in less than a day, in reality. So we've come a long way since then.
Can you talk about any specific tool systems or platforms? You've obviously just mentioned a few there. Can you delve into them a little bit more? Can you let us viewers know what's going on behind the scenes?
So, I'm very happy to. I'm just conscious that I don't really want, I don't want everyone to get bored and snooze off. But it's quite interesting. We're actually attracting some interest from other lenders, other smaller lenders, or even larger lenders who are hearing about what we've built and they're now wanting to have a look. And we actually had a lady who's a good friend in the industry, who's setting up the UK arm of an Australian development fund, and she said, she wants to license it tomorrow, and she told me that it would, if she had access to the platform, she'd only need 4 underwriters, not the 6 that she's budgeted for. So it's really good. It's really good to hear that. But look, in a nutshell, there's not one part of the Avamore lending process that it doesn't affect. We've effectively semi-automated the entire lending process. So, for example, we get an email from a broker with an inquiry. We can forward that to a bot that will auto-populate the inquiry form, and then we'll send that back to the broker to check that they're happy with it. If all the information is sufficiently completed on that form, that can go straight into credit for a credit-backed decision. Once the credit-backed decision's gone, the client can effectively digitally sign that they're happy with the heads of terms. The beauty of all the data being uploaded is that the credit decision is really fast. So we have heads of terms that can be effectively auto-approved if they meet the right criteria. But if they don't, they can sign off the criteria that just need to be focused on, and then credit can make a really quick decision just on those bits that I guess were on the margins. But those are things like automatically analysing clients' assets and liabilities. Obviously have a credit model which calculates the interests and just the broad loan parameters. We have an AVM tool, which tells us, whether the client's aspirations of GDV are achievable. I can go on and on. We can, we effectively have a portal which instructs professionals. So valuers, monitoring surveyors, lawyers, they all submit their quotes. Then we can issue them with instruction letters. We can issue them with loan summaries. They're all automated. And then when those due diligence reports come back, we can upload them into our parsers, which then effectively tells us how far off the borrower's initial estimates are from the actual due diligence reports. And then we can work out, if we need to restructure the loan, how the loan can be restructured, even looking at some of the client's existing portfolio to maybe plug some of the gaps. Then the deal gets handed over to underwriting. The other things that we can do is automated checks on insolvency checks for the directors. We've got an API hooked in with CreditSafe, so we can effectively run hard credit checks as well. Obviously, try to do that as late as possible for obvious reasons. Credit papers are all automated. When the solicitor's report and title comes back, we've got a parser that runs that through the parser. And effectively tells us instantly. So you don't need a super sophisticated, although we have very experienced set of underwriters. We don't necessarily need to have sophisticated underwriters to have a sense of whether the title is acceptable or not. And then, we can also automate the generation of loan documents, loan agreements. So, we've got a very slick process all up to completion, and then loan management through the central platform. So all drawdowns logged through that. We can automate redemption statements at the click of a button. We can auto-generate extension letters, all that kind of stuff. So, and frankly, I'd say we're only about 80% of the way there in terms of our existing operating model. So there's probably another 20% of the way to go in terms of all the automation that we can. There's still gaps, still holes that we need to fill in.
Of course.
So, yeah, that's like I said, there's a lot that we're doing, and everyone can have the ideas, but I think the key thing is executing on that.
Yeah,
the execution is the hard bit, because lots of people have ideas. Is that actually, can you deliver it?
Yeah, of course. And I think it's within the beta phases is when you make the mistakes, you learn, you get the feedback, and you know how to roll out. Yeah.
So we've got a really interesting decision to make as to, do we actually split the technology business off and then start to look at non-Avamore technology projects as well. So within the specialist finance ecosystem, whether that's working with lawyers to make them more streamlined, or valuers, or MSs, or or whatever, right? There's or even with brokers, we can see that there's lots of different areas of technological development that we can work on that will add a lot of value to people who are stakeholders in our space.
Yeah, and I mean that pretty much answers my next question, which was, with the rise of prop tech and fintech collaboration, do you see Avamore doing much more in-house, or would you collaborate with systems externally?
So, for example, we work with HubSpot at the moment. We've been using HubSpot as our CRM since 2018. We could try and build a CRM like HubSpot, but why would we bother when HubSpot already exists and we can just leverage off their technology? They do what they do really well, so let's just use their technology because it's already so powerful. And what it would cost and the length of time it would take to build those components would be so slow that we're like, it's all right. We'll use that. So I think the same goes for KYC, the third fault type organizations. Part of that is also something we need to work on our funders with, but people like that, we don't need to build that in-house. That's the third part, something we can work with a third party supplier on to leverage that. I mean, we're talking to the likes of Broker, which is a kind of cost comparison site for brokers and borrowers to submit their cases and basically be able to see who's the best lender for the deal. And we're looking at talking to them, for example, about integrating their our API with their API, so that essentially we can, if there's enough information, you can almost get an automated credit decision through Broker or other similar platforms instantly, and it's going to make that transaction so much smoother. So for sure, we're happy to look at working with third-party providers, provided that they're adding value, but it very much depends on the use case. So there will be a lot of situations where we'll build it in-house, but there are a lot of situations where there's already an existing off-the-shelf solution that we can just plug into, that doesn't necessarily detract from the value that we're bringing to the table.
So if we're talking about technology and market perspective, what collaborations do you feel are going to have the biggest impact in our industry?
Okay, but I probably need an example of what if you can give me an example of a collaboration, what kind of collaboration would you say is that I could use as a reference point? Because I'm not sure. There's so many collaborations that you can do.
No, of course.
I think that, let's just say for example, right? If I was talking about that, trying to follow your lead, but obviously you tell me if I'm on the right track in answering your question. For example, you could give a white label. You could white label the inquiry form for a broker. So broker can just give our inquiry form on a white label basis. Give that to a broker, and brokers can get the clients to fill that in. And so, to speed up that process, or you could effectively give, one of the things that we probably need to start thinking about doing is giving more of a customer portal or broker portal, which gives a much clearer picture of where deals are at and the stages are at, which I think we can do, but give them a much clearer picture of how deals are progressing. If we can do that with individual brokers or large brokerages, or give certain brokerages a slightly enhanced, a bit more of a way of looking in to see how the sausage is being made, proverbially, that maybe gives them a bit more of an advantage. And so there's an opportunity to scale with the brokers that are willing to embrace and collaborate with the technology. And the same goes for other professionals like surveyors, like monitoring surveyors, and like lawyers as well, right? Which is that, one of the things we're also looking at doing is streamlining our requirements and our engagement with the lawyers, so that we can reduce the amount of back and forth, reduce the number of inquiries that go to a borrower's solicitor to the ones that are absolutely necessary. And again, just to make that entire process that bit easier and quicker. Nobody makes any less money, but they can do it with much less friction.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. The question, there was no right way to answer it, but in essence, it's really about the lending industry. It's probably from where I'm coming from. So streamlining anything for the brokers and of course for the clients to be able to see different stages, I think that's definitely going to have an impact.
But if we can just I'm going to turn that question a little bit on its head though, which is that I think that we've seen it now where we invite brokers to use the portal. We're like, look, you don't have to wait for us to get your indicative terms. You don't have to wait for us to get your heads of terms. If you go and fill the app form out directly, and you can do that any time of day at your leisure, you can have that as quickly as you want. But the amount of pushback that we've had which is why we built the bot to help make that process that bit easier for them. The amount of pushback that we've had from them is actually really remarkable. It's really surprising how much they've pushed back on a lot. Well, I say they, as in a large proportion of them push back because they like or want the idea of a human processing it for them. And probably the fact that, and a lot of it boils down to they just like the fact that there's a human they can pick up the phone to, and shouts at if if things aren't being done at the speed or in the level of accuracy that they want, which kind of gives rise to an interesting conundrum for us, which is that we can make the front end of the business very efficient from a technology perspective. So origination and underwriting, you can make that really, really efficient. But I say always, for the foreseeable future, you're going to need to have faces at the front of the business, because the people who are submitting the business want and need that. Yeah. And they don't necessarily value the way that we do as the lender, the transition to more technology, because they like to feel that they have that degree of agency and persuasion and control. whether that's true or not. And we'll also need more people at the back end of the business, because if we're going to increase the number of loans that we're managing, we're still going to need to have asset managers talking to the developers and asking them what's is everything okay? What's the problem? Do you need any help? Blah, blah, blah. But I think it's that middle office. So from the point heads of terms are agreed through to, the asset management part, so to completion of the loan, that's where the best of the streamlining is going to take place, because we're able to process so much faster. But you're still going to need to have the faces at the front and the back end of the business.
Of course, yeah. I think that's the other thing as well. I went to a broker event the other day with both the Georges, and at the end of the day, if they're able to fill out the form and they can receive their indicatives while they're not having to wait for one of the RMs, or some people call them BDMs, we call them RMs, for them to jump on the phone and give them their indicatives, like HOTS meet within the office every day, a few times a day, credit meets at 3:00 so they can have their answer they want, whether good or bad. At least it's for efficiency. It's quicker than them waiting for someone to become free.
I think the thing that you kind of pick up on the back of this is that brokers like speed, but that speed is surprisingly low on their list of priorities when they're working with us. And actually the service is probably the most the biggest priority for them. It's quite an interesting learning in that regard. And the funny thing is a lot of lenders in our space, they talk a good game about speed. They say speed and service. I think speed is generally less of a priority than service. Service is the big priority. Speed can be helpful, don't be wrong, but I think in our experience, it's the service and actually it's certainty and trust. And actually what we try to kind of say to anyone who listen is that the main priority of the technology that we're putting in place is it's not so much about speed. It's actually about the predictability, because it's that predictability that's going to drive and yield trust. This podcast is sponsored by Avamore Capital. Avamore Capital is a development and bridging lender based in London, but lending all over England and Wales, lending on projects from £250,000 all the way up to £25 million on bridging, development, refurb and part complete developments. Please visit www.avamorecapital.com to find out more.
Okay, so let's move a little bit away from technology now and let's move on to leadership.
Okay, here we go.
How do you build a team culture that embraces innovation as well? So we're still tapping on the technology side, but it's rather about we're changing and moving with the times, as well as, we're not resisting it. How do you build a team culture that does that?
Okay, so it's a very prescient question, because it's something that we've been battling for the last, I say battling, but I think we've won that battle now, but we were definitely struggling with it 6-9 months ago, where I think that what I would say is that initially the technology was put into the business because Zahir and myself, we understood the tech. We understood enough about the tech. We hired the tech people, and we had the vision for the tech to drive the rollout and the deployment of it. But the difficulty was that we effectively were forcing that on the business. So we were doing it in a top-down manner, and I think that in hindsight, that was we probably could have done that a bit better. Mm-hmm. More recently, or say probably over the last 6 months, what's been the big differentiator around the adoption of tech has been that letting the individuals in each department have a sense of agency and ownership around the design and the delivery of the technology. Right. So that you are more likely to, if an individual is requesting a feature, and then the technology team or technology department are delivering that for them, they're more likely to use it, to test it and to give feedback, as opposed to enforcing something on them and making them use it, they're less likely and less inclined to be as to be using that, to be testing it, and to be giving you the feedback on it. And so, you know, so we're one of the big things over the next 6 months is there's certain packages in what we've delivered and built that still lack utilization relative to what they should be. And so it's how do we work with those teams to get them to get those packages to be used more? Because the point of every feature that we build is it's meant to like make everyone's lives easier and faster, more efficient, and the clients are meant to have a more predictable outcome as a consequence of it. But if people aren't using them, then
of course
that's not going to happen. So that's the key lesson, that key learning now, which is that we're approaching it with much more of a bottom up type of approach, but still with myself and Zaher. So now Jacob and Greg are much more involved in the overall, the day-to-day technology strategy, but then the strategic, the vision, that still comes from Zaher and myself, or we still have an input into that. So we're still adding value, just in a slightly different way.
I think it's like giving the team that involvement and making them feel like, again, I think we spoke about this earlier, but part of the journey of the tech rollout and the innovation, because we're bringing it in-house, we're developing it in-house. So it makes it much more, I guess, a collaboration,
well,
as opposed to something being decided and then put on the team. Like we've got great people heading up our teams now. So it's nice for them to also have their input. Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, I think if you look at all the department heads now, that they're all providing input and feedback, requesting features. But, you know, I appreciate you've been with the business for a few months now, but fundamentally, like if you turn around to me or you turn around to Biraj and you said, actually, look, I'm suffering this pain point at the moment, what I do, you know, let's just say, can we just design this sort of lead generation feature or this or that or the other? Because actually I want to be able to, you know, market to this subset, or I really want to get this bit of data or this bit of MI or whatever, because it's actually could be really powerful for the role that you do. There's absolutely no reason why that can't and won't be built. And then you're of course more likely to use that because you're going to, because it was built for you in the first place. Yeah,
right?
Of course. Yeah. No, it's definitely, I work very closely with the tech team, to be honest. I think I've just moved closer to like being right next to them, which I'm sure they'll be very happy about. But yeah, I think Silas helps me a lot. I speak with Biraj a lot on all of the tech advances and things like that, especially when we have things going out in press. It's always nice to know a lot more. And with Silas, I think we're building something specifically actually for the FP show, which we've got coming up.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, so it's super nice. It's nice to be able to be much more innovative when we want to come under the fintech bracket. So we want to be using QR codes and we want them to be moving on to landing pages and things like that. Silas and Biraj are helping me with tracking. Also want to know, so we may have a few incentives going along for, but yeah, we want everything. I like everything tracked as well, so that when we have stats and, you know, I then need to deliver them to Adam, I then have some solid numbers, and that's really what we work towards, because it's all well and good marketing, but you really need, it has to be a numbers game as well. You can't just be putting everything out and blowing budget and not knowing where it's of value. Yeah,
it's got to be, you know, if it's not measurable, then, you know, then how do you know the impact of it, right?
Exactly that. So what skills do you think the next generation of finance professionals will need that weren't as relevant 5 years ago?
Probably the best example I would give is like an underwriter. So an underwriter historically needed to, at least with us, needed to know how to look at loan documents and be able to give feedback on loan documents, needed to be able to read, you know, report on title, ancillary data, things in reports on title, you know, needed to have a really keen eye for detail in, you know, things like monitoring surveyor reports, valuation reports. I think those skills are, you know, because those things that takes a lot of time and takes a lot of effort, and it creates a very high bar for the type of individual. that has to do that to be able to do that job. And actually, I think the technology is going to lower the bar of competency and experience. So someone like a Charlotte, for example, in a year or two, instead of having to wait in 5, 6, 7 years to become an underwriter, she could actually she could be an underwriter or do underwriter's job in a year or two, because the bar has been lowered in terms of the technical proficiency that you need to have. Because what you really need is, so you're going to have to shift your skill set to one from being an underwriter to what we call an executor, someone who executes deals. You basically get, so that what that requires is a set of skills where you need to be organized and you need to motivate people, and you need to, it's kind of a cat herding. Can you herd the cats into the pen, so to speak? Because if you've ever been involved in a specialist finance transaction, which I imagine most of the audience will have been, they'll all know how hard it is to get all the moving parts moving in exactly the right time and to get to the final destination. So it'll be much more around cajoling than it will be around what I would call the technical proficiency, because I think the technology will enable the technical side of things to be a lot of the hard stuff on the technical side to be done for us.
Yeah, of course.
And we're already doing that.
So you feel that it would actually be that I think your team would embrace the technology and the innovation, and would that be your piece of advice, that that's what would help them?
Well, I think, look, there may be situations where there may be certain individuals where they're like, do you know what? I don't want to do this. This is, this is, they maybe want to have really roll their sleeves up and get down, and they like to be in the detail of hundreds of pages of data and text and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's like, if you're able to earn the same amount of money for doing, fewer hours of work, or process more deals and make more money because you can actually make more money because you're able to do more work. You're able to be more productive for the same amount of hours that you put in. Why wouldn't you want that? Like, do you know what I mean? Like that would be logical. But look, some people will have in their minds that they're not doing execution. They're credit officers, and they want to, and they want to do this, that, and the other, right? So fine, good luck to, if that's what they want, good luck to them. That's fine.
Yeah.
But we serve our clients best by being able to process transactions in the most predictable, low friction way possible, right? So we want that's the kind of business that we want, and so it means that. It means that actually what they can do, what the underwriters are doing, is they actually get less time. They spend, already, because the credit papers are automated, they're spending less time, copying and pasting and filling out tables and cropping photos and, doing all sorts of shitty admin tasks that, that don't really add any value.
Yeah.
And they now have more time to focus on actual credit risk.
Yeah.
Actually focus on the stuff that matters, as opposed to wasting time doing stuff that isn't adding any value.
And the things that will help them really excel in their career as well.
Yeah.
It's being able to be on that learning curve and that trajectory is what will push them, not the admin. So, it's needed, and it's good to be able to roll your sleeves up and get involved sometimes. But it's really, you pay for the brain.
Yeah.
The brain time. Okay. Well, let's move on to you.
Okay, here we go.
A little less tech and Avamore. What's been the most personally rewarding part of your journey so far?
To be honest, I think it's when I look at the number of new housing units that we financed, like that's the thing that always gets me a little bit, because if you really break it down, right, if you really break it down in the most negative way, you would say we take money from one set of rich people and give that money to another set of slightly less rich people, and we make a bit of margin on the way through, right? That, if you're being cynical, you'd say, well, that's what they're doing. And I think that it's really difficult to, if you just look at it as a financial play, I think it's very difficult to sustain a business like ours, particularly with some of the challenges that have come up, particularly over the last few years. So, but if you think about, but the thing I've always been really hot on is supporting young and up and coming developers, helping, Bob the contractor who's been building for 30 years but never actually developed for themselves, helping them get started as an actual house builder. It's helping that SME house building market and helping deliver units that frankly wouldn't get delivered if we or our peers in the market weren't active and operating. We've lost a massive amount of plurality of house builders from the housing market, to the extent that there's only a fraction, I think something like 10% of the small house builders that are actually actively developing compared to the 1970s, when, granted, the house building sector was much more fragmented, but because it was more fragmented, more housing got built as a consequence of that. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, 80% of the 80% or more of the housing stock that gets delivered is built by the same 10 people, same 10 large national house builders. Mm-hmm. And those national house builders, they're looking at sites of 75 plus units generally, and at the end of the day, if they can't achieve the set price, they're not going to build it. An SME house builder, their primary job is to get things built, and how much profit they make doesn't matter too much as long as they're able to keep their business going and their gang going. Yeah. So sometimes the going is good and they make loads of money, and sometimes the going is not so good and they don't make as much money. But they're always building and selling, right? Mm. So I think the fact that we support that end of the market, these small infill sites, Barratt and Bellway, they're not building 3 semis. They're never going to do that. No. But you think about how many of those kind of infill small sites there are all up and down the country. We've got a housing crisis. Indirectly we're doing our bit. Yeah. And then I suppose you look at the part complete sites as well. How many of those sites would have sat stagnant and gone nowhere if we didn't come up with the money? And then you think about how many subcontractors, I don't want to, Christ, no one's giving me a knighthood or anything like that. I'm not asking for
one
it.
Day.
But I think the point is, like, we have facilitated a lot of people's livelihoods, right? There are a lot of tradespeople who they might have been sat waiting for the contractor or for the developer to pay them, and the developer wasn't able to pay them until we were able to come and step in and refinance those schemes out on a part complete site. Yeah. So, so that matters to people. Those are like real, personal, human level like things that obviously we don't see that directly, but we know that that's going on. Yeah. So, again, so that's why I think that there are these moments of like real personal satisfaction. I suppose on the other side of it as well is, if you think about from our funders' perspective, our funders sometimes have money from pension funds, right, which they collate and then deploy to originators like ourselves. You think that we've in the hundreds of millions, near £1 billion deployed, which means that we're now in the realms of 100, 80, 90, 100 million pounds of returns sent back to, that's those are real people's pensions. Yeah. that are benefiting from that. So again, that if you really break it down, these things are, you sort of take it for granted because you don't think about it on a day-to-day basis, but actually, in a funny way, we are impacting people not just in the UK but globally, because obviously we have American funders. Mm-hmm. So that, there are pensioners in the Midwest of America who a very tiny sliver of the money they get in their pension is being deployed through our lending, and that's why it's really important that we do a good job. But because we've returned so much money now, we can feel a really great sense of satisfaction as a consequence of that.
Absolutely. And like achievement, and it's really nice. It's heartwarming to know that you're helping people. It's their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, I know we always do this one, don't we? Yeah. We do this one to our guests, so it's your turn now in the hot seat. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice how about we go before founding the company?
Oh, wow. Okay.
What would it be?
Before founding Avamore, right, okay. Probably the biggest mistake actually that I made when we started was I should have been more open to pigeonholing ourselves earlier on. So probably for the first 2 years of Avamore running, I would go to broker meetings or borrower meetings and go, oh yeah, we'll look at anything. Right, just send it to us and we'll tell you whether we like it or not. And I didn't realize that actually brokers don't like that. Brokers like certainty. It goes back to trust, right?
Yeah.
Which is that a broker wants to know what you will do and what you won't do, so that they can work out what's an Avamore deal and what's a XYZ bank deal, right?
Yeah.
And I worked that out. It took me 2 years to work that out, and I think that must have cost us relationships on that journey. Yeah. I think we probably could have. We probably could have done more business, or we would have been much further along with a number of brokers had we been more open to being like, do you know what?
This is what we do.
This is what this is what we will do. I'm confident I can get this done. So send me that. You say that. No, I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I still make that mistake from time to time, because I see, you see a big deal and you go, oh, maybe I could get, because we've done, I've done it in the past where I talked to, a deal would be kind of outside parameters for a funder, but I believed in the deal. And, it's happened, some of our biggest deals that we've done have been deals where we've kind of gone out on a limb, talked to our funders and go, look, we really like this deal. I know it sits outside of our normal parameters, but I think we should do this. And we've got it done. And so I still get tempted to do that today, but I know that largely speaking, it's a bit penny wise and pound foolish, because when you say that you'll do that for a broker, it dilutes in their mind what you are and what you stand for. And obviously, you're obviously marketing chief, right? So it's kind of a form of brand dilution when you say that when you actually say, well, we'll actually do that as well.
Yeah.
And it must sound really bizarre, because you're like, well, why would you turn down a deal that you could do? But actually, in hindsight, I'm starting to realize that actually being trust is the most important thing, right? Internal trust, but being a high trust organization internally and a high trust organization externally is, and that's probably externally, they're both important, but externally might be even more important, right? Particularly from an origination standpoint.
Yeah.
And being prepared to turn business down because you don't want to erode people's perception of you, of what you do, I think is quite important.
Yeah. Yeah, no. That's a good piece of advice for your younger self.
Yeah, I don't think I would have listened to myself.
That's the problem, isn't it? You say, oh, this is what I would have said to my younger self.
Yeah.
Okay, what excites you most about the next chapter for Avamore?
Yeah, well, I suppose we touched on it, but I think
slightly.
I think the direction we can go in from a technological standpoint. I think from a day-to-day lending perspective, I have very little to do with that.
Yeah.
I get brokers phoning me up, and we were talking about it on the way here. I still get brokers phoning me up and placing cases with me, and I naturally hand those off. But I have to be very clear with them. Like, I have no influence as to whether this deal lives or dies.
No.
I don't have a say in this. And so the lending side of things on a day-to-day basis, I've moved past that, I suppose, in terms of my role. And so it's just strategic what I do. But I suppose on the technology side, that's where I'm most excited because not only do I see the opportunities within Avamore, which still remain enormous, because even getting the technology, within Avamore, I think it's almost a never-ending job. But actually, it's when I look at adjacent industries or adjacent businesses or people within our vertical and going, yeah, I can help you, and I can help you, and I can help you, and I can help you.
Yeah.
And then you talk to people outside of your space, and you go, and they talk about their problems, and you go, I'm pretty sure I could, pretty sure me and Biraj could sort that out,
Yeah.
or Chris or whoever, or Silas. Like, I'm pretty sure we could do something, put a dent in the issues that you've got there. And so then the challenge comes around resource and time, and focus, and impact. So yeah, those are the things I'm most excited about. And I have a bit of an idea about how we reshape the specialist finance market, and almost becoming the infrastructure for the entire market, as one of the things that I think is a possibility. But there's nothing's off the table.
Yeah.
But at some point, you kind of got to go. You got to go where sometimes you have to go where the wind blows you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so we'll go with the flow, and we do. If I kind of stick to the core principles about adding value, giving people value, experience teaches me that we'll end up in a good place.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think having, again, touching on like your heads of departments and directors, Adam was just appointed to the board, but I think everyone is really here for the journey now. Like those of us, the team is growing rapidly. We've had new people join the team, and they're just as hungry and excited, which is really good to see. But I think just recently Adam done a article in Business Money Facts, and that was on like AI integration and innovation. So everyone is here for like the journey now, and I think it's really exciting times. I'm excited.
well, no, but look, you're obviously a very positive and energetic person, but so I expect nothing less. But as I was saying on the journey over here, in 10 years we've appointed 6 people onto the board, which is actually a really big thing, and we've got, we can see the next 2 board appointees quite clearly. Maybe they're 18, 24 months away from getting to that milestone, but you can see that there, and there's a lot of things that we're putting in place or about to put in place for key leadership people that will enable them to feel part of the business and part of the journey.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you can tell whether we are internal or external, like client meetings and things like that, like we're all enjoying where we are, what we're doing. And I think passion is something that people don't probably speak about enough, because I think there's a lot of people, especially within our industry. I mean, like, especially if you want to talk about this bridging industry, which is where I came from before, it's a saturated market. So everybody is, you don't want people that are clocking in for their 9 to 5. You want people that have got a real passion for where they are and what they're doing. And really the company that, I don't want to say they work for, they are a part of.
Yeah, look, we've been discussing this on and off, but the culture of Avamore is you don't have a job at Avamore, you have a career at Avamore. And I think that people who want to punch a clock, there are businesses in the specialist finance industry and beyond that are those businesses are better suited for those kinds of people, because those businesses offer stability, but they also don't necessarily offer the challenge, and they don't offer the opportunities for advancement. So I think that if you want to be professionally challenged, but you're ambitious and you want to get on, and look, you only need to look at, obviously we talked about Adam, and he's just he's joined us from he was an internal relationship manager at a bank, And now he's on the board and he's director of sales and marketing, and he's done that in a space of 5 years, right? And he's in his mid-30s. I mean, great achievement.
Absolutely.
But then you look at the likes of Ed and Harry, and they joined us as graduates, and they're department heads, and they're, they're very well compensated, but also that, they very much feel part of the journey. They feel invested in it, and it's really interesting. And even, we talk about Nick, finance director, and he runs asset management as well. He's again, you talk to him, massively challenged by having to have the finance and operations role, but also having to take on asset management. But in terms of like personal growth, career growth, he can't have a boring day.
No.
And
who wants that?
Who wants that? And so that's the thing for me, is that, that if you want to roll your sleeves up and really get stuck in, I think we offer a really great environment for people, and we nothing gives me greater pleasure. I mean, obviously you asked me about like the things that gave me satisfaction, and probably the one thing I didn't touch on, but probably when I really think about it deep down, is actually that we must have had not far off 100 people come through Avamore since we founded over the last 10 years ago, right? Maybe not, if not 100, but like 60, 70 people maybe. I need to speak to the accountants to check exactly the number of people who've had they've had P45s or whatever on the way in or out.
Yeah.
But first of all, with maybe one or two exceptions, anyone who's worked at the business and has left on good terms with me and Tahir and others within the business. And so, that ability to maintain a good positive relationship, that for me is really satisfying. But then also, you could tell obviously that it gives me real pleasure and satisfaction to see the development of the people that have come through the ranks, and both internally, and then you look externally where people started with this, where they started with us and where they are now, whether that's still in Avamore or somewhere else. We do the development of people is probably the most important thing that we do above all other things, and that development, knowing that when people leave us, they move to bigger and better things, right? It's not always the case, but generally speaking, people end up in a better place after they leave us relative to where they started with us.
Yeah.
And that's really, that means a lot, actually.
No, definitely. No, it's a lot. Of course, your father to two lovely boys, and you hope, three.
Three.
Yeah,
three, yeah.
Three. And, I think it means a lot that that someone hopefully will be doing that for them one day.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm always thinking probably too many steps ahead. But I'm already thinking about how do I help them with their careers? Build. I always like to think if they need a job, I'll be able to find them a job as well. But it's really important that they end up somewhere where they're valued and they can be developed as individuals. And if not, I may have to take it upon myself to do that for them.
You've set up a good base, so
yeah,
I'm sure they'll do where their heart and minds follow.
I wouldn't force them into any business that I was involved in, because I think family and business isn't always the best mix, especially if you ask my wife. But but notwithstanding that,
no, of course. So, talk to me about your work-life balance. What keeps you motivated and, still being able to get up and get to your meetings? And do you know that you work out? Do you have a personal trainer? Do you lift weights?
I mean, I think most people know, but anyone who's been on any of my socials will probably know that occasionally that I'm not a stranger to the odd steel plate or two.
I think it's really important. I think they talk about it for, it's like mentally and physically. It's really good for you, I think, just to get in the gym, get the endorphins and oxygen flowing, I think. So I get all my best ideas. We've talked about this, haven't we? Yeah.
And I know that Adam very much encourages you to kind of go to your creative space. And I think I do. I sort of do the same as well, in that I try to use a portion of the early part of my day to be doing some form of physical movement, whether it's lifting weights, or whether that's playing tennis or something else. But I try to be physically active, because I think that particularly in the working week, it really gets the day off to a good start. I think that people know who Jocko Willink is, but I think I think one of the reasons he goes and does a workout every morning, first thing every day, is that no matter how bad the day is, at least he got a workout in at the beginning of the day.
You've achieved that.
You've achieved that.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I think, like Jordan Peterson, he's like, first make your bed, right?
Yeah.
I'm definitely a big proponent of that. I don't like an unmade bed. But in terms of like work-life balance, I as you know, like I'm kind of always on. So
no, Michael, not you.
Yeah. So if and like I know we exchange messages on a weekend. I was exchanging messages with Greg yesterday.
Yeah.
Zaher's actually very good. Zaher will be in the office more than I will in terms of the hours, but he the minute he leaves the office, he's very much he's off. Yeah, he's very off.
I think it's actually when you're in the office, there's, I'm usually getting pulled pillar to post and there's something going on or someone needs something. So actually on the weekend is when you have that creative time where I can really delve into probably some of the larger projects and things like that.
Yeah. And I think that for me, it's that, especially now that I'm much more strategic rather than, I'm much more strategic, and Zaher as well, but being much more strategic than operational. Actually, I don't add an enormous amount of value being in the office, really. Like, that actually physically being chained to a desk doesn't necessarily add lots of value. Where I do add lots of value is, is by reading things or listening to, useful sources of information. And it can, because that gives the ideas, or whether that's management related or whether that's technological, whether that's marketing. I love Gary V.
Yeah, you do.
So or whether it's just physically training to look after looking after my physical health and mental health. But of course, as you know as well, I'm involved in Variety, the children's charity. So I'm on the advisory board, UK advisory board of Variety, or I was the last time I checked, and I'm a senior committee member of the Props Awards, which is now into its 33rd year. We raised best part of £500,000 last year for kids in wheelchairs. That's really meaningful. And then I've also, I have 4 mentees through the Reading Real Estate Foundation, which is through part of the Reading University Penny Business School. So I really enjoyed that. And I'm also a mentor to someone at Bristol University. I went to both universities, I suppose. But I enjoy it because actually spending time with younger people, that gives me energy and that gives me ideas. And so, they think it's a one-way street sometimes, or people sometimes might think, well, it's a one-way street. But actually the way I see it is it's not. They provide inspiration and excitement to me. Actually have a mentee, Charlotte, she's from Kenya. and I said, and historically I've been a bit, I've not found ways to add enough value to the international students. I did end up hiring one a couple of years ago, Ziad, who's obviously been amazing. You know Ziad, he's in the office a lot, but and he works in my family office. But talking to Charlotte, for example, I said to her, look, you don't know this, but you actually have a massive advantage, and you've got something really big to offer people. Particularly when you talk to employers, and that one of those things is that the demographics of the developed world, as we call it now, right? So the Europe, the US, the North America, very much the developed parts of Asia, East Asia, they're experiencing huge amounts of demographic decline. In fact, there's demographic decline everywhere apart from one continent, which is in Africa. I said, look, you're offering access to a high growth marketplace. And as the sort of African economies mature and develop and grow, And as they inevitably will do because of the people, the people you've got there. So you've got an opportunity to offer something. It's like you actually have something of real value that you're going to be able to offer to people in the future. So I said to her, it's really important that you're aware of that now, right? Because that's something when you're talking to an employer, that's something that's really, that's something that you can actually put forward as like, this is why you should hire me now, because I can be your gateway to the Kenyan market or whatever, right? So again, it's like being able to have, if I didn't have mentees, I couldn't have that kind of conversation. And that's really cool.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think that there's a lot of people talk about self-worth and, those types of things like less fear, less doubt and all of that at the moment as well. I mean, I know you and I had a conversation on the way over here. You were like a little pep talk for me. But yeah, I think often when people go into interviews and things like that, they're always like, oh, it's very much a case of pick me. But it's always nice to be able to know how much you have to offer and what you've got to bring to the table, really. Because that's when it's, again, a joint partnership and a relationship. It's what you can bring forth to the company and what they can give you. And that's when I think it's when the magic happens.
Well, look, everyone has their own individual skill set and talent, right? Yeah. And I think sometimes you just have to sit back and go, what do I bring to the table that other people don't? And sometimes it's not technical. Sometimes it's about personality. Yeah. It's just, you just have to sit down and work it out. But certainly like I said, certainly the working with mentees is, again, it's really rewarding. And, working with mentees is rewarding because, I've been doing it for 10 years. So invariably, one of my mentees is going to end up becoming a client. I've hired mentees in the past. We'll probably hire mentees in the future. It's like there's a degree of altruism to it, but I get more from my mentees than they get, or from being a mentor than the scheme gets from me. And I think the same with being involved with the charity is that I've got more from that than it's got from me, invariably. Which is so, it's and I think the lesson the learning, I say lesson, the learning that I'd share with anyone around that is that I have a very, very busy life. There are really very few quiet moments. From 6:15 on a Monday morning until 11:45 on a Sunday evening. There's not that many gaps where I'm not doing something remotely productive, whether that's personal or family. But at the end of the day, you only get one life and you want to live it to the fullest. And you've got to try things, you've got to get involved in things, because as a result of getting involved in things, opportunities come your way. You think that people will say, "Oh, I'm always seeing your LinkedIn post. I'm always seeing your LinkedIn post." I'm like, you're obviously not following Colin Horton then. Because he makes me look like a rank amateur. But again, it's like being out there and engaging and putting yourself out there, and that's how our biggest funding line came about, through my posting on LinkedIn and someone, one of the guys there reaching out to me from San Francisco. Wow. There's that kind of, if you don't put yourself out there in the world, no one will know you, and no one will know you exist. And in this day and age, you've got no excuse.
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like that last one was for me, to be honest, but I'm sure that
it wasn't. It wasn't. It was for anyone who'd listen.
Well, it actually meant a lot to me. Yeah. So I'll be carrying that forward for the rest of my life now. Well, that's all the questions from me. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for doing the Q&A with me. It was actually great. Thank you for having me on. Well, I think, Davina, you did such a good job. I think I'm in danger of losing my spot as the show's host. I think I've done quite well, actually. I think you have done very well, yeah. But anyway, well done, Davina. Thank you very much for some really great questions. I look forward to seeing you behind the mic again in the very near future. So if you've enjoyed Davina's role as a questioner today, please do give her a follow. Davina, where can people find you on the internet, and do you want them to find you? Yeah, that's the one, isn't it? No, I'm on most socials, as I should be in marketing, but they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, but Yeah, probably, most likely LinkedIn.
Okay, so follow Davina Patel on LinkedIn. Obviously, make sure you're following the Avamore Capital pages as well. All of those, links to all of those will be in the show notes, in the captions below. I've been Michael Dean. You can follow me on the internet at property_funder. I'm on most platforms, but generally most easy to find on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And thanks, as always, to Avamore Capital for their continued and ongoing support and sponsorship of the podcast. And that's it for now. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.